So this past Sunday, the sermon was about Jesus waiting on you, and text was John 4, or chapter 4, verses 4 through 6. Pretty known story, if you will. It's about when Jesus met the Samaritan woman at the well. Um, and one of the there were several points that were brought out during the sermon, but one of them was about how God is waiting on us. A lot of times, He's waiting on us to do the last thing that He told us to do. Jesus is very intentional about how He deals with us, and that He's waiting on us in most cases to consistently obey His word. Here you see where God obviously asked the Samaritan for a drink, and she says, well, basically she's like, what dealing do you have with me? Essentially being that I'm a Samaritan woman, obviously you being Jesus.
Right.
But nonetheless, it was about that at that particular moment, it's about being obedient.
Right. And just in that is when you say Jesus is waiting on us, Jesus was already at the well and was waiting on the Samaritan woman. Even just in that sentence is very intentional because He was waiting on her just as He's waiting on us to do different things, different assignments, or just lessons that we still haven't learned yet. Jesus said, if you love me, then you will keep my commandments. And God's commandment is to be obedient.
Yeah. And in that you see in the scripture, he told her, said, a woman of Samaria came to draw water. Jesus said to her, give me a drink. Mm-hmm. He didn't like ask, He commanded her. And in that moment, a lot of times there are things that God is telling us what we need to do.
Right.
He has His permissive will, and He has His perfect will, and then He obviously gives us commandments. And and when you don't obey those commandments, obviously there are those directives, there's consequences. And so I think this is a good example of how God can speak very clearly and decisively about what it is He's asking us or telling us to do.
Mm-hmm. And even in that, I have a note that says things are so much better when you obey. You don't have to deal with the consequences when you don't obey. So yeah, it's blessings in being obedient.
Absolutely. And I think the other side of that is blessings in obedience, and of course there's consequences in disobedience. And I think that's we talk about different types of obedience or disobedience. There's God tells you to do something, you just outright don't do it.
Right.
And then there are things that God tells you not to do, and then you do those things. It can come by commission and omission. I think those are things sometimes, people, we don't always think about disobedience in the terms of not doing the things that God is telling us to do.
Right.
That's also the same as doing the things that He tells us not to do.
Mm-hmm.
The bottom line is you're missing the mark. That's what sin is. You're not doing what God has called you to do or told you not to do.
Right.
Another note that I had was or another part of obedience is Jesus is waiting on you to trust and obey Him. Mm-hmm. The thing is, God, as we talked about, like God's love language, like people's love language. God's love language is obedience. Mm-hmm. The fact is, He's wanting you to trust Him, because that's what obedience is. It's being able to trust that what He's telling you to do or not do is truly, in your best interest, and or for the greater good of society, of the believer, something that He wants to get done in whatever instructions He's given you.
Right.
And that requires a significant amount of trust in Him, that He knows what's best for you.
Right. And trust is to
you do it when you obey. Right. Right.
I said something.
Right. I think that's what you say about to Gabriel's point. Um, Sometimes, like I say, when you're obedient, you still have challenges along the journey, and in that, God is still strengthening you.
Mm-hmm.
It's still about the next step. So it's like, yes, you're obedient. You took the first step in obedience. Cool. That doesn't mean that the next step won't be harder, that it won't be a steeper hill to climb. But in that, you're strengthening yourself as you climb higher and higher, and as the resistance, if you will, gets higher. Because the reality is, the closer you get to the mark, sometimes it does get harder. Like, people say, well, man, starting is the hardest part. Yeah, but not when you were obedient. When you're obedient, starting is actually the easiest part. The hardest part is when you get closer and you're like, man, I'm obedient and it's supposed to get easier, right? But then it doesn't happen.
Right.
And it's like, well, yeah, because you're getting higher. It's the incline, you're getting close to the top. But if you keep pushing, when you get there, then you're like, okay, well, now I'm strong because I went through the journey.
Mm-hmm.
And I think that's where a lot of people miss it. They hear clearly what God told them to do, and their heart's desire to be obedient, and they take the step, and it's like, whoa, well, I thought it would be easier.
Mm-hmm.
Like, I don't know about. Maybe God didn't say, because this is not what I thought it was going to be.
Mm-hmm.
Like going to law school, being done with it, and then trying to study for the bar. It was like, well, it's the next thing to do. You got to study for the bar. But as I was studying, I'm like, man, the only thing I got left is to pass the bar. That was the hardest thing to do. Like law school was challenging, but for me to study for the bar, it was just, I don't know what happened. Like it's like I got done, I just ran out of gas. But I had to keep pushing. I'm like, man, you're right there. And I literally studied 17 hours a day from the day I graduated on a Saturday, celebrated that Saturday, drove back to Dallas that Sunday, that Monday. From that day until studying for the bar, it was 17-hour days. But I found that to be so challenging. Um, and I knew I had to do it, but it was hard for me because I'm not a guy who is afraid to like work. I'm like, okay, I gotta work. That just is what it is. Let's go get it. But I, I didn't have it. I don't know what was going on, but I knew I just like, okay, dude, you just gotta keep going, keep going, keep going. And then once I obviously took the bar past it, it was like, okay, whew. But it definitely took, hearing God continue to say, just keep going. Because at a certain point, I'm like, man, this is not supposed to be hard. Because I wasn't retaining what I thought I should have been retaining. And that's what was making it challenging. It was like, okay, today I read A, B, and C. And then I would go in the next day to study. And it was like, where did all that, where did it go? It's like I ain't even seen this stuff. And it was just, and I was starting to panic. It's like the test, they ain't moving. I'm moving closer to it. And I'm getting there. And it's like, man, I'm supposed to be doing this. And I didn't feel that. But when I can only say, when it was time to sit down and take that test, when I finished it, I knew I had passed it. I was like, oh, I passed this.
I'm always obedient. Even when just moving from, like, I knew I had a goal. I knew I wanted to leave East Texas and move to Dallas. And even whenever I did, I was like, okay, God, I did what you said. Um, I've been building my clientele. I've found somewhere to stay. And now, me thinking I have all my ducks in a row, like now it's gonna get easy, when it was actually the complete opposite. I was Before I moved, I was just coming up on weekends, and on weekends, I was booming. I was making, really good money just coming up on the weekends. But now that I'm living here in Dallas, it's like, where are all my clients go? I still got to pay my bills. Like now, I have even more bills because I've moved to Dallas. So it's like I kind of felt like, okay, God, I've been obedient. You told me to stop doing this. I stopped doing this. You told me to move. I moved. You told me to stop hanging around these people. Stop hanging around these people. Now, you kind of isolated me. I don't really know anyone here in Dallas. Um, so now I have a new job. I'm in a salon downtown Dallas. I have my own apartment. To me, what looked good on the outside is look like, oh, I'm winning, but I've been obedient. But on the inside, I'm like, I don't have no clients. I don't know what happened to all my clients. My boyfriend still do. So it's kind of like, what happened? You know, like I thought the reward was going to be at the end, but it's like the reward was steady getting pulled further and further away. But I know now, just being in the industry for years, I know that was a lesson that I would learn later on. So just even in that, I feel like you have to, when something doesn't go your way, or when you think God